Stay here.
Hey, is this Sayasek?
Yes, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great.
Good. Is now still a good time to talk?
Yes,
Cool. All right, so I think we can go ahead and get started. I've got your resume in front of me. So you're currently at Accounting Seed, and you were at Accenture before that. Is that right?
yes.
Okay, cool. All right, well, that sounds good. So I'm going to kind of put my sort of tech green hat on and just ask you a series of questions, and we'll kind of go from there. I guess before I get started, and there's no right answer to this question, sort of on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not very technical, maybe like a business analyst type requirements role, and a 5 is very technical, sort of fluent and familiar with Apex and components, and basically writing code all day. Where do you sort of rate yourself on that spectrum?
On Rate myself on the spectrum on what? On what topic?
Just sort of where, just in terms of how technical your roles are, and where you think your skills are. And
Oh, I
there's no
see.
right answer. I'm just some people are more, admin types where they're not coding a whole lot, whereas some people are more
I'm
technical
coding.
developers and want to write Apex all day.
Yeah, I code all day. Not all day,
Okay,
like if
got it.
out of the 8 hours, like maybe I code 3-4 hours, yeah, my coding time, and that's
Yep.
that's
Okay.
coding, yeah.
Got it. Okay. So let's start. Let's start really, really basic. So when you're setting up a new user, what are some of the things you need to do to make sure that that user has the right access to the Salesforce application?
So when I'm creating a user, you look for the license. You check if Salesforce licenses is necessary. If not, you can provide platform. If they don't need access to any standard Salesforce objects, platform is sufficient, and it's better because it's cheaper. Then next is you look at the profile they need, and you provide them the minimum necessary profile, and see if they need any permission sets. If your company uses certain apps like DocuSign or Accounting Seed, maybe you need to give them the permission sets that give access to the app. And what
Okay.
else you check? You make sure that you make sure that the company has the licenses that you want to give to the users. Maybe you're at the limit already. And
Okay, that sounds good. So you mentioned profiles and permission sets. So what's the difference between a profile and a permission set?
the profile is required, and a person can only have one profile. A person can have probably an unlimited number of permissions. I don't know what the limit is, but I never tried testing it. But you can have from 0 to as many as possible, as many permission sets as you want. Profile provides basic access to objects, apps, tabs, record types, page layouts, and the permission set provides additional access that you might want to give someone who has that certain profile. So,
Okay. So let's say you're sort of greenfield. You're in a brand new org building a brand new application, and let's say that that in the future there will be multiple applications in this org, potentially different development teams for each application. So how would you go about designing sort of the profile and permission set model with that in mind?
I see. Can you reiterate the scenario, please? So there are multiple teams, multiple projects.
Yeah. So let's just say you're in an org where there's multiple applications. What is the best practice in terms of designing profiles and permission sets for users in that org?
So first I have to identify what do the users need to do. Do they need to just submit, like, is it for salespeople where they need access to opportunities, accounts, leads, etc., or is it just maybe they submit expense reports and then I I just give them access to those objects, and within that set of users, is there anyone who might need additional access? Maybe he's like a team lead, and so yeah. First of all, I will go for the needs. What is it? What is it that the people need, and what's the minimum level of access I can provide that will allow them to do what they need to do in Salesforce?
Okay, makes sense. So in terms of like sharing and row level security, what are some of the methods you can, well, not methods, but tools you can use to extend that?
Sharing, yeah. So sharing settings is about having access that you don't own. Yeah, the most strict is private, and it's at the object level. If you make it private, that means people only have access to records in that object that they own. So they don't see anyone else's records unless you have some other things overriding this. But if it's just plain vanilla private, that means you only see records that you own, and you can expand it to public read or public read write. So it depends on business need. So yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
And then what was your question about something about sharing? Can you repeat?
Yeah. So what can you use to extend sharing? So you mentioned sort of the different levels of access. But how do you go about it?
Yeah. So one is the OWD. It's how you extend sharing. Yeah. At the OWD level, then the sharing rules and the manage sharing, and then also chatter groups.
Okay. Yep. That sounds good. So in terms of data modeling, let's talk a little bit about record types. Like, why would you create a record type on an object?
Yep. You create record types if you want a person, a certain profile, to have access to more than one page layout. So if there is a need for a certain user of the profile to have access to more than one page layout, like 2-page layouts, maybe they do business like in the residential real estate and also commercial real estate. Maybe there are 2 types of accounts that the users will create. So you will create 2 record types. One is residential, one is commercial, and assign a page layout to each, so that they see different sets of pick list fields and pick list values in each.
Yep, that sounds good. Okay, let's say you're creating new objects and you need to introduce a relationship between 2 objects. What is the difference between a lookup and a master detail relationship?
Yeah, so lookup is a loose relationship where the sharing settings are not inherited. Well, with master detail, the sharings are inherited from the parent to the child, which means if a person has an access to the parent, they automatically have the same access to the child. And by default, in master detail, if you delete the parent, the child is also deleted. And what else is there? Yeah, one of the benefits of the master detail is you can do roll-up summary fields, such as average, sum, min, max, total. So these are the key differences between lookup and master detail.
Yep, that sounds good. So are you familiar with Process Builder and Flow?
I'm familiar with Process Builder. I'm loosely familiar with Lightning Flow. I just have created several flows on my own, but I have not used it at my work.
Okay. So can you kind of just compare and contrast the options available in terms of, low code process automation,
Sure.
just between simple workflow rules, process builder, flow builder.
Yeah. So the most basic type of automation is the workflow rule. It's the oldest, and it's a simple if-else. If this, do this. Process builder is a bit more complex. It has a series of ifs. It's much better than workflow in that you can line up the ifs, and also it's visual, much easier to navigate, much easier to understand, to show to the stakeholders, to the customer. And the only limitation a bit from the process builder versus the workflow is that it cannot send outbound messages unless it has changed, but I don't think it can do that yet. So typically you would go for process builder, yeah. And as for the flow, the flow is the most advanced type of automation tool we have. It uses the same backend as the process builder. It's very visual. The only downside of flow is that it's not easy to learn. Yeah, it's very powerful, but not easy to learn.
Okay, yeah, I think I would agree with you there. Okay, so let's transition to Apex a little bit. So when you're writing an Apex trigger, how do you make sure that your trigger can handle up to 200 records in one transaction successfully?
Yeah, so your question was, how do you ensure that the trigger handles 200 records at a time?
Yep.
Yeah, so the trigger by default accepts 200 records at a time. Yeah, so if we want to do some updates or inserts, then we have to do it on the list. Yeah, so just accumulate the records that you want to process and add them to the list, and then do the DML.
Yep. Okay. What about queries? How do you structure your queries in a trigger to make sure you don't?
Yeah, you can do for loop, so that automatically processes it at 200 records at a time.
Can you
for circle loop? Yeah, so you do for account A colon select.
Oh, yep. Okay, I got it. I see where you're going. Yep, that makes sense. Okay, good. Let's see. What is the optimal number of triggers on an object?
Yeah, one. But it's hard to keep it one because although you just might have one, you might install a package and they have their own trigger, so you might have a couple of triggers, but ideally it's one. And you don't put the logic in the trigger, you put the logic in the class that the trigger close. All that we have in the trigger are context. Yeah, isn't if you have before update, do this, after update, do this, before insert, do this. So it's just like a traffic light that directs where the logic.
Yep. Okay, good. In terms of batch Apex, what is sort of the structure of a batch Apex class?
Yeah, to a batch Apex class, you have to implement the batchable interface, and it has 3 methods: start, execute, finish. In the start method, you query for the records, and in the execute is what you want to do with these records. Like, do you want to update them? And then in the finish is once everything is done, once execute has done, once you've processed everything in the start method, then you either you can send an email, or you can start another process or call a certain method. So the benefits of the batch Apex is that each batch has its own limit, and so you can process a lot of records, like more than 50,000 records at a time. What else is there? Yeah, you have to call the batch for when at the class, and by default it's 200, and you can increase it, decrease it, up to your needs.
Yep. Okay. Why would you use the future method in Apex?
Yeah, I don't know why you would use feature method if you can do Cubo right now. The future method, I think, only accepts IDs, so you cannot pass in objects. So I think right now you would use Cubo. The advantage is for like when you, so yeah, the future method just gives you an additional set of governor limits to work with. It's asynchronous, and it has some limitations. So a couple of years ago, I think maybe 2 years ago, Salesforce came up with a Cubo, I think, interface.
Okay. In terms of Apex testing and test classes, what are some of the best practices around writing Apex unit tests?
Yeah, so it's good to have a setup Apex in the test class, to have a setup so that you have some basic set of data that the different methods can make use of, and your methods should have descriptive names explaining like exactly what are they testing for, not just like test 1, test 2, test 3, so that it's easy for some other developer to understand. And in each method, you want to not only achieve code coverage, but also make sure that the actual DMLs or the error messages are being generated. You want to test both for the positive scenarios and the negative scenarios. And if you're running into limits, governor limits, then you can use the start test, stop test, and you have to annotate the class and the methods with isTest.
Okay, cool. Are you using source control at all, like Git or anything similar?
Yeah, GitHub.
Okay, so can you kind of walk me through a standard workflow in terms of how you use Git?
Yeah, so I use IntelliJ. My IDE of choice is IntelliJ. So when I get a Jira ticket, I create a project that matches the Jira ticket, and then I clone the repository, and I create a branch of my own, and I push the code to the Scratch org, make some changes. Once I'm satisfied with the changes, like with Apex class, the unit tests, then I commit it and then push it into GitHub, and then make a pull request.
Yeah. So what is the how did your updated code get into the test sandbox?
I see. Okay, got it. So yeah, I make sure that there is no merge conflict before I make a pull request. If there is any merge conflict, then I fix it. And then after I push my code into my own branch, I review the changes and make sure that these are the changes I actually wanted. Didn't some like unwanted changes creep in? And then once everything looks okay, I make a pull request, give a description to what changes I did, so that the CTO, when he reviews the code, it's easier for him to understand why I did those changes and what Jira issues this relates to. And I make sure that I make the pull request against the feature that we're working on, typically not the master branch.
Okay. So you mentioned spinning up a Scratch org. So are you pretty comfortable with the Salesforce command line?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it, but I don't like it. I find it so much easier. I can do everything in IntelliJ. I can create Scratch orgs, create those definitions, has chatbot, person accounts, and everything just through the IntelliJ user interface.
Okay, gotcha. In terms of deployment, like moving metadata, between sandboxes or into production, what options are available to do that?
You have Jenkins. We use Jenkins, but I'm not familiar with. I've cloned the Jenkins jobs and like just navigated and use it to push like the code into the QA org, but I didn't really study it and didn't go into depth. Besides Jenkins, I think you have Ant and maybe some other tools, but I'm not familiar with it. I didn't explore this.
Okay. So I guess last question, and it's not really a technical one. Why are you interested in?
Yeah, so Felipe reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he told me about how well you're growing, how you're a private company, and how there are a lot of opportunities for growth. And so I'm curious about actually what kind of opportunities are and what kind of growth I can achieve. It's a very big company, and
Yep.
and I think probably there are also very interesting projects that I can choose from, and probably very smart people I can learn from, and yes, I'm actually really curious about to learn more about it and what is it you guys are doing well that allows you to grow so well and so fast.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can speak a little bit to that.
For me, it's very important to learn, to continually be learning, and that's one of the reasons why I love to be a developer, is because there is unlimited ocean of learning I can do, and I'm being challenged all the time. Do you find yourself being challenged and learning all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned a ton, even just on my current project. But no, I feel like each project I've had the opportunity to grow my skills just from the stuff that I was asked to do. It's a little bit, sometimes it's a little bit trial by fire, and you sort of have to learn on the job. But there's also opportunities, I mentioned going out and getting certified. We'll also do sort of internal boot camps every now and again. Like we did like a lightning boot camp a few months ago. We also have access to some of the partner training, like the live partner training that Salesforce puts on, which obviously isn't available to everybody, and we sort of get access to that. And not just Salesforce, but MuleSoft, and I'm sure Tableau will be coming as well. And then, if you're interested in going to things like Dreamforce and Trailhead DX, there's also opportunities to do that. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities to continue learning, and I definitely, on a personal level, feel like I've learned a ton just being here.
Cool. Thank you so much for answering all my questions very concisely and clearly.
Yeah, no problem.